afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Seminole County Lunch and Learn on the 2021 hurricane season. My name is Andy, and I'm joined, of course, by our emergency manager, Alan Harris. Alan, usually we would have these hurricane expos in person, but for the last 2 years, we've had to go virtual.
Yeah, it's been a shame. We really enjoy being able to talk to our residents directly at one of these larger events where we bring multiple agencies together to talk about the hurricane season. Unfortunately, we were unable to do that again this year. We're certainly hoping to do that next year and even bigger and better than ever before. But we did do a virtual Hurricane Expo, which is available on our website. It's got a lot of helpful hints on how to prepare for the hurricane season. We know a lot of individuals over the last year and a half have moved into Seminole County, and we certainly want people to be prepared for the upcoming hurricane season. Looks like it may be a busy one.
Yes, certainly. I mean, it's June 1st was 2 days ago, and we already have had 2 named storms in the Atlantic.
Yeah, 2 tropical events, we know that it's going to be an above average season. The National Weather Service has told us that, and Colorado State University, which is actually one of the lead hurricane forecasters, which is very interesting there in Colorado. Senior meteorologist had an opportunity to talk to him a couple times, and it's quite funny. He says he will do the forecast for the East Coast, and then he runs back to Colorado. But you know, we know that the numbers are going to be pretty high. We're already seeing this through some of the tropical events that have already taken place. But we don't want people to get scared. And people often ask when I do a public outreach, well, what's the numbers? Well, really don't think too much about the numbers. Think about the one. That's what we do here in Seminole County. We prepare for the worst case scenario. So the worst case scenario would be a Category 5 hurricane coming into the Brevard-Volusia County line and going right over Orange and Seminole County. Basically, almost what Hurricane Dorian was scheduled to
Slated to do.
Right, a couple of years ago. So very scary. We've pretty much always had that as our planning initiative when we go into hurricane exercises and trainings and things like that as the worst case scenario. And then Hurricane Dorian came knocking in 2019, and it looked like it was going to take that exact same track and be a Category 4 or 5 hurricane. So that's what people should prepare for the one hurricane. Don't think a lot about the numbers. It's overwhelming when you do that. We just came out of, we're hopefully coming out of COVID. There's no reason to stress about the hurricane season. If you get prepared in advance and know what you're going to do, it makes it a lot easier.
Now, certainly last year, Central Florida got lucky. We didn't have any issues, and we didn't have to contend with a full-on hurricane coming towards us, as well as the COVID-19. However, what is it going to be like this season? As we are coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, is there going to be anything different as far as our sheltering or any of our plans preparing?
Yeah, so we really lucked out last year. There was a lot of hurricanes. Of course, we went into the Greek alphabet last year. The only hurricane that we actually did any preparedness for as far as during the hurricane season was Hurricane Isaias. And Hurricane Isaias did look like it was going to hit the Central Florida area, and then it skirted the coast, actually off the coast. I don't even think it did any damage in the coastal communities, maybe some of the beaches, but that's about it. And then went up into the New England states. So there will be things that are different. You know, we have not, although we are getting there, and it looks like the numbers are improving a lot. We still have COVID out there. We still have variants of COVID out there. So we still need to be cognizant of that as we go into the hurricane season. So there will be a couple different things that we do. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to call for evacuations a little bit earlier than we normally would. Now, why are we going to do that? That allows individuals that can leave to go ahead and leave. So those people that are retired or maybe they're able to get off of work, they don't work at what we call an essential required business before a hurricane. So, grocers and hardware stores, they're going to be really busy until that last day. But if you work in an accounting firm, maybe they would be able to let people off a little bit early so you can evacuate out of the community, especially if you're talking about a Category 3, 4, 5 hurricane. You want to get out of the community if you can. And you want to do that a lot earlier. So we're going to be calling for evacuations a little bit early. As far as sheltering is going to look different than the last few years. Last year we were planning on opening a number of shelters. We were going to require facial masks and coverings. Due to the new Florida law, we cannot require that. So anyone that comes into an emergency shelter, they can wear one, they cannot wear one. It's up to them if they want to wear one or not wear one. We cannot ask about vaccines. So our initial plan was that we would have an area where there would be individuals that are vaccinated, be a little bit safer, at least make people feel that they're maybe a little bit safer. And unfortunately, because of the new Florida law, we are unable to ask that question as well. So just know when you come to an emergency shelter, we want to manage expectations. We don't want people to get there and get angry because the person next to them doesn't have a facial mask and covering on, and they, in conversation they find out, well, they're not vaccinated, I was vaccinated, but now I'm surrounded by people that aren't, or a family member, my child hasn't been able to be because they're 11 or 10 or 9, so we just want to manage expectations.
So what are one of the things maybe we are doing at the emergency shelters? We can't talk about the masks or about vaccines. However, we can still give people a little bit more space than we have in years past at these shelters.
So there are some mitigation efforts that we are going to do. The first mitigation effort is we are going to the best of our ability, require social distancing. Now, I say the best of our ability because we only have a finite number of shelters and we only have a finite number of spaces. So we have an entire school, but we can't use the entire school. We can only use the sections of the school that are structurally sound to withstand or be resilient to a hurricane. They're not resistant to a hurricane, but they're more resilient than staying in a mobile home or a manufactured home or a low-lying area if you live in a floodplain, things like that. Those are people who are going to call for evacuations. So there's a very small amount of space in there. So we're going to do our best to require social distancing. We're going to do our best to do triage. So as people come into the shelter, we're going to ask them some questions, just like you would be asked normally if you went on a cruise. Do you feel bad? Have you felt bad? Have you been around anyone with COVID? Those types of questions. And then we're going to have an isolation area. So during the event, if someone starts to get sick, moving the individual and then anyone that they've congregated with, all of those individuals into isolation areas. Now, of course, our isolation areas, we've always had isolation areas because people have the flu, they have colds, they have all kinds of things that happen during, the hurricane. These isolation areas are going to have to be much larger. So that's a change as well because with COVID, now if I get sick because of my proximity to the other individuals around me, they're now in quarantine. So all of those individuals would go into an isolation quarantine. So what does this mean for everybody? If there's any other place to go, it is best to do that. So if you can go to a friend or family member's house, it's number one, it's more comfortable for you. You know the person, you can ride out the storm together. It's just a much easier, much more comfortable,
private.
Right? Much more comfortable way to do it. You're not surrounded by people that you've never met before, and probably will never meet again. So if you can do that, that's the best option. If you can't do that, if you can maybe move and you're able to evacuate out of the community to a friend or family member's house, that would be good as well. If you can't do that, then maybe to a hotel. That's again concrete masonry block structure. That's exactly the same type of structure that is a school. So in the central areas, in the Central Florida area, we are only going to we're going to only request individuals to evacuate if they live in mobile manufactured homes, low-lying areas, and then special needs. Individuals that require electricity to run medical devices, things like that.
So this is all where we come into it, asking about be prepared early and certainly figure out your plan early. We don't want to have to think about right before a hurricane would come towards us of what is our plan. So this is what we're always talking about in emergency management is plan ahead of time and have that plan in place.
Yes, absolutely. So our first, we say make a plan, get a kit, and stay informed. And I know Aaron Funk's going to be with you tomorrow talking about getting a kit together and things like that, and that'll be really good. He's great with that. And home and cleaning up around the home, our honey-do lists around the house. So he's going to talk about that tomorrow. But very important to make a plan. Know where you're going to evacuate. We've talked about that. If you are going to evacuate to a shelter, know what's going to be provided at the shelter. Now we call the shelters refuges of last resort. So why do we call them refuges of last resort? Because a lot of times people, and again, managing expectation, they have a picture of what's on the local or the national news of an evacuation shelter, and they see all these cots that are beautifully laid out with blankets and things like that. That is not a hurricane shelter. That is post-storm. That is a recovery shelter. That's after the event has occurred. There is no way we could have, in any storm, we could have anywhere to from 10 to 15,000 people evacuating into our shelters. There's no way we could have that many cots and replace those cots every time a hurricane came through. It would be labor and incredibly labor intensive, and the warehouse space to house that many cots is just would be unbelievable. So what is provided at a shelter? Space on the floor. So bring your sleeping bag, bring those types of things, anything that you want, snacks, things like that. We'll provide 3 meals a day, but that's it. So that's part of your plan. Is okay, if I am going to evacuate to a shelter, I need to make sure that I've got this little space, enough for a sleeping bag and maybe some of my personal belongings. 2 people, obviously, 2 sleeping spaces and some personal belongings. What am I going to bring there? The second thing that you need to think about is insurance. So around your home, take photos, call your insurance agent. The price, and everybody knows this now, I mean, the price of homes are going up and unbelievable, and the price of supplies are going up. So call your insurance agent and say, hey, and I just did this recently. I called my insurance agent. I said, hey, listen, all these things are going up. All these supply costs are going up. Is my insurance adequate to replace my home, repair my home fully? And he said, Alan, actually, you need to change a couple things. So we've made those modifications. You can't do that as a hurricane's approaching, but I can do that right now.
So those are the things to be taken care of at the start of hurricane season, or really even all year round.
Absolutely. And now's the time to do it. Don't wait until a hurricane is approaching to start thinking about your insurance. This is the time to review it, read it, talk to your insurance agent. And then flood insurance is important too. So if you live in a flood zone, even if you don't live in a flood zone, I don't live in a flood zone, I still have flood insurance. It's very cheap for me because I don't live in a flood zone. But I wanted to make sure that the home is safe and secure in case something happens where water backs up from a stormwater system, something somehow floods my home. So flood insurance is real important, especially though if you live in a flood zone or you live near a flood zone. You definitely, if you live near a lake or river or anything like that, chances are at one point or another you're going to get close.
Happen.
Yeah, you're going to get close to being flooded, or you are going to flood. So definitely have some flood insurance.
So one of the other things you mentioned was about seniors and individuals with special needs. I mean, everybody should be planning ahead of time, but those individuals truly do need to make sure that they have a plan in place. What are some of the ways that Seminole County can help those individuals with special needs or with senior advanced ages?
Sure. So part of your planning process when it comes to special needs, really anyone, you and me as well, is to make sure that we have a list of our medications. Every time I go to the doctor, it seems like he wants to adjust my medication somehow. And so you want to make sure that you have a good list of your medications. And then right prior to a hurricane coming, you can get a refill of all those prescriptions. But have those written down in your plan. What are my current prescriptions? So when I get to the shelter, when I get to my friend's house or whatever, somehow I've lost it, I know exactly what I'm taking. But before a hurricane approaches, even if it isn't the normal refill time for your prescription,
Might as well.
You can go ahead and get a refill for that prescription. We want anyone that needs electricity to run a medical device, or anyone that requires care, anyone that is on oxygen, to register for our special needs program. Every county in the state of Florida, by statute, has an emergency management office, and that emergency management office is required to have a special needs registry. Now, the special needs registry for us, it allows us to know who is going to come to our emergency shelter so we can prepare for those individuals to get to the shelter. We can have an adequate nursing staff and oxygen and electricity, make sure that we have enough generators, all that stuff before the individual gets there. Of course, it's impossible for us to do that if people just show up, because we have no idea what is going to happen. We don't know who's coming. So it's real important for us for them to register. The benefit to them is that prior to the hurricane coming, we give all of those individuals a call. So during Hurricane Isaias, we gave them one call, and the call was that there is a hurricane, it could come this way, start to think about your plan. The second call would have been, and we would love to do this for all 500,000 residents, it's just impossible for us to do that, but we can do it for our 1,800 individuals that are currently registering special needs. So we give them a call to say, here's the hurricane's coming, it's about 48 to 72 hours out. Are you planning to go to an emergency shelter? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, I would like to go to an emergency shelter, then we offer them transportation. So again, we would love to do that for all 500,000 residents. That's just impossible for us to do. But this is all a benefit of being a part of the special needs registry. If you said, no, I don't want to go to one, I'm going to write it out at home, that's fine, no problem at all. But after the storm, you're going to get a phone call or a knock on the door from a police officer or a firefighter to check on you to make sure that you're okay.
Because these are individuals potentially who have oxygen tanks or need power, those sorts of things.
Right, so they have other types of medical needs, and we certainly don't want them to be harmed. We want to take special care of our most vulnerable populations. Inside of the emergency shelter, of course, we provide nursing staff, we provide medical care, general medical care. For more advanced cases, again, go register on the special needs program, but those are done on an individual case-by-case basis. For some individuals, maybe they have trach in a vent and they are at home, and family normally takes care of them. In some cases, we may be able to accept them, and in some cases, we may refer them to another location. Could be an acute care hospital, could be a secondary type of hospital, like we have in Altamont Springs, someplace like that that would be better suited to take care of those individuals.
So if an individual does feel like they need to register for the special needs registry, how would they go about doing so?
Sure, you can just go to prepareseminole.org, which is our preparedness website. If you haven't gone to that, it's got a lot of great information right now currently on COVID, but it's also got a lot of hurricane information as well. So you go to that, you'll see a special needs registry, you click on the special needs registry, and it's an online registry. If you'd like a paper application, you can certainly give us a call at our hotline, 407-665-0000, that's the Citizens Hotline. It's staffed all day long, individuals there to help with COVID, but also individuals that can certainly help with hurricanes, getting applications out, things like that.
So we have talked about regular sheltering or sheltering for special needs, but everybody these days seems to have some sort of pet or a furry friend. Which of our shelters are pet friendly, or what should people keep into account if they are trying to go to a pet friendly shelter?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a number of different pet friendly shelters. If you go to our preparedness site, if you go to our locations where we do list all of our shelters, you'll see 2 shelters listed down as pet friendly. And those are because those are the primary shelters that are open. That does not mean that Seminole County only has 2 pet friendly shelters. We have other shelters that we can't open if those shelters fill. Thank God we've never had to open the other shelters. Charlie, Francis, and Jean in 04, Faye in 08, and Matthew in 16, Irma in 17. We never had to open up, knock on wood, we never had to open up those other pet-friendly shelters, but we can if we need to. The pet-friendly shelters, the people don't sleep with the pets. They're separated into 2 different HVAC systems, but you're on the same campus. So and easily accessible to go see your pet at any time, except for during tropical storm force winds and higher. At the special needs pet-friendly shelter, there's a lockdown during that time, and then it opens up as soon as it's safe to do so. For the special needs pet-friendly shelter, we bring the pet to the individuals. Many of them are in wheelchairs or are in beds and things like that. So, but for the general population, for anyone else, the pet-friendly shelter, which is at Lyman High School, you can go easily just down the hallway and around the corner, and you are right there with your pet. So we ask the individuals to bring their crates, their records, any toys, or something that will keep the pets, our smaller 4-legged children. We've also had other things too. I mean, we've had snakes and gerbils, and we have hermit crabs and all kinds of stuff. So we'll take care of whatever you bring to us, and you can go visit them at any time. So, but and we make it very easy to flow in and out, so you can take care of your animals. But bring them some comfort, food, some treats, things that they're used to, as well as maybe a toy or something. Since we're talking about that, you want to take care of the other children too, right? So, mental health and care is a very important part of our planning for all disasters. And definitely think about how you're going to discuss this whole hurricane season with the family. That we're preparing together as a family unit. Sometimes it's scary for a child if they're not part of the planning process. And you can make a game out of it and have them involved. And then during the event, games and toys and stuff like that, make that part of your plan. And I know Aaron's going to talk a little bit more about that, but make that part of your plan for mental health.
We do have an incoming question from a resident. Where can I find my closest shelter, and when will shelter announcements be made as the storm approaches?
That's an excellent question. So when we call for evacuations, we open up shelters simultaneously. We would never call for evacuations that have no place for people to go. Now, we have a list of shelters, but those are announced right prior to us calling the evacuations. Now, why do we do that? Because what has happened in the past, and we always learn from our mistakes in the past, we listed a whole bunch of emergency shelters, and we found that people were standing outside of the doors of some of those, and we'd never opened them. Well, why didn't we open every shelter? Well, number one was staffing. Number two was the size of the storm. If it's a Category 1 hurricane, we're not going to open as many shelters because we know, because of previous historical data, that not a lot of people leave their home for Category 1. For a Category 5 hurricane, we're opening as many things as we can open. But would we open every emergency shelter? Not necessarily. Well, why not? Because some shelters, they're all in schools, so some shelters may be under renovations. In fact, the school board's doing some renovation projects on some of our shelters this summer. So if a hurricane happens in the next 3 or 4 months, we won't be able to use those schools. So we don't want to list those schools out there and get people to line up. For example, a couple of years back, we had individuals that were lined up at Lake Mary High School waiting to go inside for their shelter. Now that shelter we would normally open up, but they were under renovations, so we ended up not opening that shelter. Those people were stuck outside. We didn't even know they were outside. They had just read the website and then driven over there and stood outside for hours. And then we started getting phone calls and said, oh, we're not going to open that shelter. Luckily, there's a shelter right around the corner. We opened Crystal Lake Elementary School, which is literally just right around the corner on Reinhardt. But, you know, we don't want people lining up outside.
So the best way is to stay informed as close to a storm as possible.
Yeah, and Prepare Seminole, we'll put it out through our alert technology, alertseminole.org. So it's important to register for our Alert Seminole system. And you can go to our website, prepareseminole.org, or you can call our Citizens Hotline again. And I'm going to plug that a lot, 407-665-0000. That's real important. Give them a call. They'll be able to answer any questions.
Well, I was actually just going to ask you to plug the Alert Seminole program and to figure out how exactly people need to register and why it is so important for people to register, and not just for hurricane season, but across the board. Individuals should be registered for the Alert Seminole.
Absolutely. So we used to call the system Reverse 911. Reverse 911 is actually, it's a company's name. So we don't use that name, although it's known as that. So a lot of times we say, hey, can you hand me a Kleenex? Well, that's a company's name as well. Instead of facial tissue, we don't say facial tissue, we say, hey, make Kleenex. So Reverse 911 is a company's name. So we use it's exactly the same technology. Our system is just called Everbridge. So the name of our is Alert Seminole. AlertSeminole.org is where you would go to register for emergency alerts. So what alerts would you get? You would get boil water notices, which is really important because we have boil water notices all the time for the multiple water utilities that are here in Seminole County. Over 13 water utilities. Each city has their own water utility. Utilities Inc.
5 different plans.
Yeah, there's so many different ones. And then just recently we launched around Lake Jessup information for those individuals about the blue-green algae that's in Lake Jessup and the toxins that were found inside of the lake, and to be real careful if you go not to go into the lake, not to swim in the lake, not that anyone would swim in that lake, but make sure that pets don't also get down towards the lake because there are toxins in the lake. So we notify for all different types of things, not just evacuations during hurricanes, not just shelter openings, although we would use it for that.
And then even recently, we can receive notifications if there's a major traffic incident, including the accident on I-4 recently.
Yeah, so there are some other options on there. So if you wish to receive a road alert, we only do it for major road closures, but you can click on that. And then if you don't want to receive that anymore, you can just log in and click it off. Severe weather alerts, some people like to get those. And then some people, also those that have been around Florida for a long time, know that happens almost every afternoon. So you can click off of that too if you want. So those are options that you can choose to be in it or not in if you want.
All right, so in the meantime, before potentially any storm would come towards Central Florida, make sure you register for alertseminole.org. Make sure you are up to date as far as your hurricane plans. Is there any last advice that we should give to the residents of Seminole County?
Begin with the end in mind. So we want to, one thing we learned in 2017 after Hurricane Irma was that we needed to manage expectations. So this is what you should expect after a storm. Expect cell towers to be down. Now, maybe they won't, but expect them to be down. 75% of the community was without power after Hurricane Irma. Hurricane Irma was not even a Category 1 hurricane when it actually hit us. It did have hurricane strength gusts, but it did not have sustained hurricane force winds.
Mm-hmm.
So 75% of the power lost on a very high tropical storm, actually. Expect roads to be closed and washed out, and that's exactly what happened. Traffic signals to be down or out completely. We will call for, normally we will call for curfews in the evening, and the reason for that is because the most loss of life that we have had here in Seminole County after a hurricane is T-bone accidents at major intersections. People not seeing the lights, don't remember the lights being there, things have changed because trees are down and stuff like that. People getting confused and then they sort of just ride right through a signal, the other person rides right through the signal like it's not there, and they crash. Debris will take a while.
Yes.
So we have learned to rephrase how we speak of debris. And at the very beginning of Hurricane Irma, we were telling everyone there's an estimated, as we go out and do an estimate, estimated 1 million cubic yards of debris. No one knows what that means. I don't know what that means. I cannot mentally picture 1 million cubic yards of debris. No idea. Then we started to do comparisons. So 1 million cubic yards of debris is 11 spaceship Earths at Epcot Center. Now we're all, anyone that's from Central Florida or been around Central Florida any length of time knows Spaceship Earth, may have
We
even
know what it
been
looks like
inside
and
of
the
it,
size
right?
of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when you think about, okay, there's 11 of those that they got to pick up, our calls immediately
Tempers
decrease.
expectations.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that we manage expectations.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ellen, for joining us. And any individuals who have any additional questions, we will certainly do our best to answer those on the Facebook comment section. So if you have any additional questions, I will be joined with Aaron Funk, our logistics manager, tomorrow for noon to 12:30 again, and we'll be talking about hurricane kits and how to prepare your home. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.